Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Candace.
And we want to welcome you to this week's episode of Fair Winds RV. So those of you who have been following us, you're going to know that this episode is a little bit different than all of our travel videos over the summer. And it's also a little bit different than what we said we were going to do, which was a bunch of how-to videos this winter. So, but we have had some experiences over the last couple of weeks that have driven us to where we're at. And we wanted to take those experiences and share them with you. And hopefully prevent others from making the same mistakes. Not that we really made mistakes, it just didn't work out real well for us. But anyway, so we are now in Biloxi, Mississippi. We're no longer in Texas. That took a really strange turn for us when we were down there.
Very strange.
Yep, and now, so yeah, again, we're in Biloxi, Mississippi. We're actually at a campground where we already have some friends at, so that worked out well for us. But we wanted to share with you guys why we're here, kind of at a moderately high level about what some of the issues that we had were. And it all revolves around work camping, which is going to be the topic for this week's video. So, and I'm just going to be reading from a sheet here, guys, so you're going to have to bear with me. We want to make sure we don't miss anything here. So that's pretty much the update to where we are now. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what work camping is and what that looks like.
Yeah. So work camping is really exchanging work for a site at a campground. It's been around for years. It's gaining in popularity as camping is getting more and more popular. Yeah, so the typical work camper, it used to be mainly retirees, but now it's anybody. We've met 20-year-olds who are doing it, we've met 70-year-olds who are doing it, and anywhere in between. The differences in work campers are you can be a volunteer only, so you put in X number of hours and they give you a free site. You can put in X number of hours and you get a free site, and then on top of that, you also get paid. Or you can be paid only. There's things like Amazon Camper Force, things like that. And you strictly get paid, and then you pay for your site on your own.
Like she said, there are different compensation levels you can get for work camping, which is, brings us into what the benefits are of work camping. So work camping is not just a benefit to people like us, who are living full time and traveling, but it can also benefit the campground. So some of, I guess, the benefits that we, are kind of taking advantage of, or what we find important, is it's kind of a bit of supplemental income, if you will. It can actually be income. Or it can just be, like Candace said, just a free site, right? So
reducing your expenses.
Right. So basically what you get out of work camping typically is the site and access to all of the amenities at the campground. And then usually all your utilities are covered as well. So your electric is covered. Your propane may be covered. It depends. I think it's going to depend on whether or not the campground actually fills propane tanks. The one we're at right now doesn't, so that's not really covered for us. So, it's a supplemental income, and they provide access to all their amenities and give you a site. Another benefit is that, all right, so let's back up a little bit and let's go back to what the different types of work campers are. So if you're just a work camper that is working for your site, that's a lot different than someone who's coming in and working for a site, and then for X number of hours, and then gets paid an hourly wage for anything above that set number of hours. So what we found is that if you're just working for a site, a lot of times the campgrounds only want about 20 hours of work out of you to give you that site. And then if you go beyond that, let's say you work 25 hours, then they'll pay you at a rate of whatever, $10 an hour, $13 an hour, whatever that is. So the benefit to just being at a campground and working solely for your site, as a lot of times you can just be considered a volunteer. And what that means is you're getting a campsite for free, basically. It could be a $500 a month site. It could be a $1,500 a month site. It doesn't matter. But if you're considered a volunteer, that has some tax advantages, right? So you're not getting an income. You're not going to fill out a W-4. So if you're trying to, maybe stay in a lower tax bracket like we are, that can be really beneficial, right? So once you start getting paid for your site, and submitting a W-4, right, that's when you could potentially put yourself in a higher tax bracket, and you may not want to do that. So it's just something to keep in mind. And then the last thing, I think, for work campers or for full-time RVers, who, especially like us, who may, have quit their jobs to go do this full-time, retire, if you will, is that it can help keep idle hands busy.
Idle hands are the devil's playpen.
I know that some people go a little stir crazy when they don't have something to do, right? So if you're working for a site, hey, that's at least 20 hours a week probably that you're gonna be able to keep yourself busy. And then for the campground, right? They benefit from this as well. So they're getting very cheap labor, like super cheap labor.
Yep.
You can't even work at a fast food, in the fast food industry anymore for $10 an hour or $13 an hour. Nobody does it, right?
You, you're cool, and you, I'm out.
But that's about what it works out to be. We found is about $10 to $13 an hour is what the rate is. Either if they're just giving you your site or if you're working, for salary. Right? They don't have any payroll on you, right? They're not doing the W-4, so they're not having to do payroll, taxes, and all that kind of stuff. And then I think one of the most important advantages to a campground is that there's always someone on site to take care of things. If they have a properly staffed work camper staff, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, people with skills.
Right, so exactly. So, we live here on the site. We have a vested interest in being here. We want it to look nice. We're here the vast majority of the time.
Yep.
So to the campground, if something happens, there's a water leak, there's somebody's outlet on their pedestal doesn't work, that's something you can just call up a work camper. You should be able to, and just say, hey, I have this issue, and they go and take care of it, and they don't have to call an electrician, a plumber. So there are quite a few benefits to the campground as well. So that's kind of the basics on the work camping and how it can benefit both, the RVer and the campground. So let's do this now. Let's talk a little bit about how we ended up here. And I'm just going to preface this with, we did not have a great experience with our first campground doing this at all.
No.
It was like being, if you're
Stranger
you're a Stranger Things fan, it was like being in the Upside Down, if you will.
Alternate reality?
Yeah, an alternate reality for the maybe a little bit older folks. Maybe the Twilight Zone is a good comparison. It was just really odd. So we're not going to go into the details, super details about that or where we were. We don't want to put that out there. But go ahead and tell everybody kind of how we got here and why we are at this specific campground.
Okay. So when we first decided to do this, we knew we wanted to be south in the winter. So I decided to focus on Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. So I went to workcampers.com. I created a resume, put it out there for employers to see, but then I also had access to all of the job listings that were coming in. And so I applied to a few, sent out our work camper resume, and started talking with this company on the Gulf Coast of Texas. And we were talking with them, oh my gosh, all the way back in probably January of this year. And they said, yes, we can use you. We've got, 8 properties in the area. Here's a list. Tell us which ones you're interested in. So we did. They ended up putting us at one. And in May, the place that we were going to go to, they ended up getting a new manager, so we started talking with her. Everything was over the phone. She did send us a few emails, but nothing was ever really put in writing. which was a huge red flag. Definitely get everything in writing. We'll talk about that.
All right, sorry, we're looking at this again. Just don't want to miss anything. I wanted to talk a little bit about why we left, and basically the big, I think, 3 reasons that we left, right, were the roles and responsibilities. They were not defined at all while we were there. There was nothing. It was like a free-for-all. Nobody really knew what they should be doing on a daily basis, or when they should be doing it. And a lot of, so that was a big one right off the bat, that we could see that there was no structure. And I don't want to say structure as in everything's got to be like military or anything, but there was just nothing. It was just a free-for-all. You even had to find your own hours. Right?
Yes.
So they wanted 20 hours a week, and actually they wanted more than that. Once we got down there, they wanted more than that. There was nobody telling you, hey, these jobs need to be done, these tasks need to be done. So you were looking for your own hours, which is not, no employer works that way, where they just expect their people to come to work and do whatever they want, right, to get paid. So there was no structure, meaning no schedule, right? And there were no roles or responsibilities clearly defined anywhere, or even marginally defined anywhere. So those were 2 big reasons. And then a third one was that we were expected to be on call, basically 24/7. So those were some big red flags for us that we kind of figured out real quick that this probably wasn't going to work down there. Now, I will say that there was a lot of other drama there too. Going on, and I really don't want to get into that. So that brings us to where we are here in Biloxi, Mississippi. We reached out to some friends. They're actually right here next door to us, and they were down here for the winter doing some jobs, and so he spoke with the owner down here. Owner down here said, yep, come on down, we got plenty of work for you. So that's how we ended up where we are right now. Okay, so that's kind of the background on what Work Campers do, what we're all about, what our experience so far has been, and now we'll get into kind of some specifics about, if you're interested in the camp worker world, about some resources that are out there for you, and then where we really want to hit heavy on this is, if you are interested in this and you end up speaking to a campground to go do this, what we really want to focus on here is the right questions to ask before you commit to anything. And so let's just start off with some resources. I know you've got a few that you use. Just go ahead and talk about those real quick.
So the big one is workcamper.com. That does require a yearly membership. I don't remember what it is. I think it's maybe $30 or $50, but that gets you access to all of their job postings, employee reviews. So as a work camper, you can go on and leave a review for the individual campground. Now, they aren't all in there because, if somebody hasn't left a review, it's not going to be in there. Every 2 months, they put out a magazine. You can access that digitally, and I think they do send it out snail mail for those of you who like the hard copy. And then your resume, when you put it in there, is available for people all over the country, the actual campgrounds to see. And so we got contacted by several people around the country.
So kind of going along with that, because we did have some people contact us, what's the need out there for work campers right now?
The need is pretty great. Because camping is becoming so popular, there's a need, obviously, for people to staff the campgrounds. And so you can work at private campgrounds, which we've done so far, federal and state parks, BLM lands. There's even stuff like I mentioned earlier. Amazon has a camper force, which I've mostly heard negative things about, but I also just heard about JCPenney does the same thing. You go in and you work in their distribution centers or whatever, and they give you a free site, or they pay for your site at a nearby campground. So there's things like that where you can make actual cash. There's the beet harvest, Christmas tree farms.
And this is all, you can find most of this. Can you find most of this in the Work Camper website?
Yes, a lot of it is either in the Work Camper website, or if you just do a Google search, work camping jobs. There's stuff like that. And then there's also a Facebook group. It's a Work Campers Facebook group. There's stuff posted on there. I like the workcampers.com, even though you have to pay for it, because it just seems a little bit more carefully vetted, I guess. There's so many resources in there. They have weekly podcasts. They've got a huge question and answer forum, I guess. Pretty much any question you can think of, somebody's asked it and they've answered it. So that's a really good resource. And I think they're the biggest one. There are some other ones. Again, just Google work camping and you'll come up with other ones. Some are free, some require a small membership fee, but that's what we used.
Another big consideration here, right, and you know, it was a huge one for us, is where do we want to be, right? We don't ever want to have to break out the heated hose again. We don't ever want to have to put our skirt up around our rig again, ever. So that's a big consideration for us, right, is location. So let's talk about finding the right campground, right? So you got to figure out where you want to be first of all, right?
Yes.
At least break it down to a part of the country. You know,
narrow it down.
Right, the Midwest, the Northeast, the Southwest, whatever that is, right? That's really where you got to start, and maybe being, you know, close to family is going to be a huge consideration for us. I mean, it's not really a huge consideration. You know, we're going to see family every year because we can go wherever we want. So really, the weather was the big one for us, and then, what kind of work are you willing to do, right? That's going to be a big one. And what kind of skills you bring to the table, right? If you have any specialized skills. Are you okay with cleaning bathrooms, right? Are you okay with doing electrical work or doing plumbing work, digging ditches? I don't know, whatever the campground needs. So you gotta decide what kind of work you're willing to do. And then, you know, how much you want to work, right? Like we said, you can work just for the campsite, which may be, you know, 20-ish plus or minus hours per week. Or, you know, you can work for your campsite and then on top of that, put in additional hours for extra pay, right? If that's something that's important to you. So you got to figure out, you know, how much you want to work. And then another big one is how long you want to be there, right? So we found that most of these places really want probably 6 months
Minimum of 3 months,
Yeah.
ideally 6.
So 3 to 6 months. You know, they don't want just a revolving door of work campers coming in and out. I mean, that makes sense, right? You want to have at least a little bit of consistency and stability in your work camping program. So those would be the big ones. Where do you want to be? You know, what kind of work are you willing to do? How much do you want to work, and then how long do you want to be there? And I think if you know those 4 things, right, you can use some of those resources, probably the workcamper.com, to narrow that down and start reaching out to different campgrounds to see, what they have available.
Something that I think a lot of people forget, and it's just like when you're interviewing for an actual corporate job, is when you go into an interview, they are not just interviewing you, you're interviewing them. So it's a two-way street. You need to make sure that it's going to work for both of you. So these are some questions that are really important, because you need to know what you're getting into before you get there. And again, get it in writing, because we had it changed in the first one. Literally everything changed from what we were told before we got there until we got there, and then it changed.
It changed
almost
on a daily basis.
Yeah. So how will you be compensated? That's a big one. So how many hours are required? I've seen as little as 10 hours a week to they want you full time. So again, how many are you willing to work? You know, and is it a fair trade? Typically 20 hours, like Jeremy said, is pretty standard. A big thing that you need to ask is, if they say they require 20 hours, is that per person or per couple? Because obviously, that's a lot more work. So what is the compensation for that minimum number of hours? So if they say, okay, 20 hours a week, what does that include? Is it just your site? Is it site and electric? Is propane included? Do you have access to all of the amenities? Some parks, most parks will give you access to everything. Some of them might limit it, but really those are kind of the parks with a lot of events and stuff.
And you need to decide whether or not their compensation makes sense for you, right? If you're going to go, somewhere and they're going to put you in a site that's normally say $500 a month for long term, and they want you to do 25 hours. Well, I'm not sure that makes sense, right? If you do the math, that means you're getting paid like $5 an hour or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing that off the top of my head. I don't know what the math works out to be. Whereas, you could be at a site, place like where we are that's a little bit more pricey, where I don't even know what this would cost us, but let's say it's $1,000 a month, for that same 20 hours. Well, we're obviously getting more bang for our buck.
Yes.
So you got to figure out whether, what they're compensating you with, the site, the amenities, the utilities, all of that, whether it makes sense. And maybe you're good working at $5 an hour. That's totally fine, if that's what you want to do. So just make sure that it makes sense to you and that you're comfortable with it.
Yeah. And some places will offer additional perks like free laundry. They have free cable. If that's important, see if it's included. The other thing we've kind of touched on this is if you're expected to work 20 hours a week and you go over that, is it just a kind of a one-time thing, or every now and then type thing? You just kind of pitch in, or if it's routinely expected, maybe you work 20 hours for your site, but they want you to work 30 hours total. How is that additional 10 paid for, and what's the compensation rate?
And I would say, even like us, we just want to work for our site, basically. And so, it's 20 hours a week where we are. We really just want to do the 20 hours a week. But at the same time, we're pretty reasonable and flexible. If something comes up in the evening where somebody, is pulling in and they have a breaker that needs to be replaced on the pedestal, I'm okay with going to do that. Maybe if I end up for 22 hours for the week, not a big deal, but just personally, I'm not doing 25, 30 hours a week. That's just not something I want to do. We have other things that we want to do, like running this channel. Again, you can be flexible without being a slave, I think, to the campground, which we have seen people be slaves to the campground.
Yes.
So you can,
you can easily be taken advantage of, and you need to determine that for yourself, whether you only want to work for a site, you don't want additional income, or you need additional income. Make it work for you, because there's the entire gamut of what's available. It's out there.
All right, so what's next here? Make sure you understand, and again, you should get all of this in writing if possible. It doesn't have to be a signed formal contract with lawyers involved, but just simple emails, back and forth, trying to get all this documented. I think a
paper trail.
Yeah, a paper trail. And I think the easiest way to do it is we had conversations over the phone, but then we sent emails back and forth, and we put all of these questions in there, right? And then if you just list these questions out, a reasonable campground will just answer the questions for you, and then boom, you've got your paper trail. Make sure that you understand the tasks that you are going to have to perform while you're there. So what jobs you're going to have to do, basically. Are you going to be cleaning toilets, digging ditches, washing dishes in the front office, whatever, right? And if you have a really strong conviction against doing something like that, like me, I don't want to clean bathrooms, you should probably let them know that up front. Say, hey, I don't clean bathrooms. It's not part of what I do. And then they can say, okay, not a problem. We got people that clean bathrooms. Or they can say, okay, nice talking to you. If you change your mind, let us know. But make sure you're very upfront about that in the beginning. You want to make sure that you tell them any specific skills that you have, right? I was an electrician in the Navy for 20 years, right? So that's a skill that I have. That's a skill that every campground needs, is, an electrician on site. Everybody knows these pedestals. They take some abuse, these breakers and outlets, right? So that's something that all of the campgrounds, I think, that we've talked to have been interested in. So if you have a skill like that, make sure you mention it. Candace now has experience with the site management tool, like
Campground Master,
right? So she now has that. That's something that they're going to want to know, so they don't have to train her when she gets there. So make sure you market yourself there with any skills that you have. What level of physical exertion are you willing to exert? Front office, right? Probably not a lot of physical activity for doing that. But maybe you want the physical activity, right? So maybe you want to be the one out doing the pools or sweeping down the sites, prepping sites, and get out and be active. So you got to decide, what level of physical activity you want, and then make sure that you understand yourself and they understand any limitations that you have, right? If you can't stand for long periods of time, like myself, then you want to make sure that they understand that, so it's not a surprise when you get there.
Yeah, like I can, I'm happy to mow grass, but I cannot use a weed eater because of my shoulder. If there's certain things that you cannot do for whatever reason, let them know.
Find out what on-call means. So on-call, I think we all know what on-call should mean, right? It means, so maybe it's your day off and something happens on the campground that needs, immediate attention, like a leaky hose bib on a pedestal. Make sure you understand when you would be on call, right? And when you're not. And make sure that you're okay with that. If you're okay with being on call 24/7, then that's fine. I guess as long as you're on the site, you're willing to respond to something, that's fine. But in addition to understanding what they consider on call is, does that on call time count for hours? I don't know how I feel about that one. It depends on how often you get called. If you're on call, if you're getting called out every day to replace a breaker or to go clean up the pool because whatever, some kids messed it up. If you're getting called out multiple times a day, then maybe I'd want that to count. If it's once or twice a week, an hour or two here or there, then but just make sure you understand what on call means and whether or not that goes towards your hours. You want to understand how your hours are going to be spread out. Meaning, really, is there a schedule?
Yeah.
That's been the biggest thing for me so far. Is actually we haven't been anywhere yet that's been willing to give us a schedule. To say, hey, Monday through Thursday you're going to work, 8 to 1 or 9 to 2 or something like that. 5 hours a day for 4 days. That's your 20 hours. I don't want to get into that too much, but I don't know why that is. But make sure you understand if there is a schedule or not, and again, we're giving all these tips, but it's really up to you to decide what you're okay with, right? If you're okay with digging ditches, if you're okay with not being on a schedule, right? All of that stuff. We're just really kind of giving you the questions to ask, and then you have to decide for yourself. And then if you're going to be working as a couple, are you going to be working at the same time? If it's 20 hours a week, and you're splitting you're splitting that. So I'm doing 10, she's doing 10, but it's total opposite hours. Maybe that's not what we want. Maybe we, because obviously that doesn't maximize the time that we have together to go do things. Understand whether or not you're going to be working the same hours and even having the same days off, because that's really a big one. As long as you can get the same days off, I think is for us anyway, that would be great.
All right, so work camping varies from one extreme to the other. Some of them provide a site, some of them don't. They just give you a stipend so you can go out into the surrounding area. Think Amazon, JCPenney, things like that. So if a site is provided, what is the cost? Is it completely free to you, or is it going to cost you? So think about that when you're looking at whether this is worth it. Are there full hookups? If you want full hookups, you need them, make sure they're included. Is your space level and is it long enough? Now we're a 42-foot rig, and then we've also got the 22-foot dually. So we kind of require a big site. And then finally, if you have pets, are they allowed? And if you have certain breeds, are they allowed? A lot of people travel with pit bulls, German shepherds, Rottweilers. Make sure that the campground will allow them, because you don't want to travel all the way down there for them to say, we're not allowed to have pit bulls on site. And now, you and Fido have to go somewhere else.
All right, so now we're just going to cover some other considerations outside of kind of that interview. Just think about how long you're going to be there, and whether or not it's feasible or actually reasonable for you to be there that long. So if you are going to make a commitment to be at a campground for 6 months, you kind of need to honor that commitment if you can, right? Now, getting in a bad situation, you know, some place that's just not working out and you know, nobody's happy about it, right? That's a little different. But to just pack up and leave because, you know, kind of done being here, that's, you know, just be careful about that because, you know, campgrounds are going to be counting on their work campers just like they're counting on their regular employees. And when a work camper, and it happens a lot, work campers just get up and, you know, they're like, hey, we're leaving tomorrow. You know, that really puts them in a bind. So that's just something to keep in mind. Something else to consider is, do you need to bring your own tools, right? It's probably something you should ask them. Or are they going to provide tools? I think most campgrounds are probably going to have the basic tools that you need, right? But just knowing, you know, what the job's going to be and what you have and whether or not they're going to give you what you need. Something else is a golf cart. Be wary of some place that's not going to give you a golf cart. Some of these campgrounds are big, and if you're walking all over this thing or trying to, you know, use your own vehicle, that kind of is a pain. So see if you get a golf cart. Make sure, and this kind of goes back to the structure, right? Is there somebody that you report to? Does the campground have a maintenance supervisor? Do they have a landscaping you know, supervisor or whatever? Do they have an office manager that you're going to report to? Or does it all just go through, does everybody just, you know, report to the campground manager or the owner or whatever? So again, it goes back to that structure, but just make sure you understand, you know, I guess really once you get there, who do I report to? Who's telling me what to do?
Right.
So that kind of will help you avoid getting jerked in, you know, 5 different directions every day, which we've seen.
As we already talked about, if you're just getting a site, many campgrounds consider you a volunteer. So they don't have a W-2 or a W-4 on you, and I-9, you know, any of that kind of stuff. So in that case, if something happens on site while you are working, are you covered under workman's comp? I mean, especially if, you know, if you're working on something electrical or plumbing, like if you get injured working for the campground, you know.
Yeah, you gotta kind of think about it, right? If you're filling out a W-4 form, right, and you're gonna be, you know, they're paying payroll taxes, you're gonna be covered under some workman's comp, right? That's my understanding. But you know, I'm of the opinion if you don't do that and you're just considered a volunteer, you're kind of assuming some of that risk on your own, right? And you got to know that. You know, unless it's just really, you know, willful negligence by the campground for, you know, and that's the reason you got hurt. But you know, if you're on a ladder and you fall off, well, if you're a volunteer, you kind of assume some of that risk.
Okay, so what is their policy on family emergencies? You know, okay, we're going to be here for 6 months, but my daughter, whatever, has something happen, or his dad has a heart attack, and we have to leave for 2 weeks. What is their policy? Can you leave the rig here? Are they going to require you to pack up and leave?
So I think just some common sense kind of stuff here, right? It's just try and be flexible, you know, work with the campground. Again, you know, if you're supposed to do 20 hours a week, you need to do 22 this week. Okay, you know, is it the end of the world? Probably not. You know, can you say, hey, next week, can I just do 18? If it's really that important to you, you know, just be flexible and work with them. Just understand, you know, schedules may shift. You know, we talked about schedules earlier, having a schedule. You know, I personally would be okay with just knowing a schedule for the week. You know, maybe it's going to be different next week. That's fine, you know, for me. But just understand schedules may shift around because of the needs of the campground. It's still a business, right? Their number one priority is running that business, right? And making their guests, right, as comfortable and happy as possible. Again, I don't want to get into details of anything, but if there's drama and you just don't, you find yourself not enjoying it because of that, then don't do it. You know, try and work it out first of all. But if it's not able to be worked out and you're not happy, we were not happy at our first one. We didn't just pack up and leave, but we weren't happy, and nobody's going to benefit from that. You're not going to benefit from that. The campground's not going to benefit from that. And so if you're not having a good time, don't do it. And that goes for just the whole experience overall as a work camper. Maybe you're not happy at that site, so you move on, right? But if you're just not happy as a work camper, then don't do it. And you know, and if you don't need to. And that's really about it. You know, the big thing I think that we're trying to, the point that we're trying to get across here is to communicate. Communicate and try and get things in writing so that both parties set their expectations from the beginning, right? So the work camper knows what's expected of them when they get there, and then the campground understands what the work campers need and want to do. And I think if that can be hammered out beforehand, and everybody's honest with each other,
Yes.
that it can make for a really good experience. So anyway, this is our second experience. This is only the second campground we've tried this at. The first one, total disaster in the upside down twilight. I think it's a combination that like upside down Twilight Zone. I think it was so weird. And then I think when the spring rolls around and it's time for us to start getting on the move again, I think we're going to have to decide. We'll decide whether or not this is something we want to do again next year, or not. So what's up next? We have no idea what's coming up. What's next? What our next video is? We'll figure it out, and it'll be out probably here in another couple of weeks. So stay tuned. It'll probably be another how-to of some sort. It might be how to set up your Starlink, or it might be how do you bake bread with limited supplies and a terrible oven in an RV. So we don't know. We'll figure it out. And
If you have any ideas, though, let us know in the comments. And as always, like and subscribe down below. It's free to you. Awesome for us.
Yep, that's right. So we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
And we hope you enjoyed the video.